For about 15 years, almost everything fun on the internet ran on one piece of software. Every dumb cartoon, every browser game you played at school, every weird animation, every loading screen with a little spinning logo. One format carried all of it. And then, on the last day of 2020, somebody quietly turned it off. This is the story of how Flash conquered the internet and how the internet killed it. It starts, like a lot of these stories, with a tool nobody asked for. Back in 1995, a tiny San Diego company called FutureWave made a little animation program called FutureSplash Animator. It let you make smooth-moving graphics that were small enough to send down a phone line, which in the dial-up era was basically magic. The following year, in 1996, a company called Macromedia bought them, shortened FutureSplash to Flash, and a legend was born. And here's what made it special. The files were tiny. While everyone else's websites were gray boxes and blue underlined links, Flash gave you animation, sound, and interactivity that actually loaded before you died of old age. So designers went a bit feral with it. Whole websites became animated experiences, intros you couldn't skip, buttons that went boing. It was the most creative and occasionally the most annoying corner of the early web. But the real story, the one this channel cares about, is the games. Flash let you build something playable, stick it on a web page for free, and let anyone play it instantly. No download, no console, and that quietly rewrote who got to make games. You didn't need a studio, you needed a copy of Flash and a weekend. So an entire generation of kids taught themselves to make games in their bedrooms. The beating heart of it was Newgrounds, founded by a teenager named Tom Fulp back in 1995, where you uploaded your weird cartoon or your janky game and let strangers vote on it. Then came the arcades. Miniclip launched in 2001, Congregate, Armor Games, 100 others, whole portals stuffed with thousands of free games. This was the browser game era, and if you were there, you remember it. Lunch breaks in the computer lab, loading a tank game on a school PC and praying the bell didn't ring. Stick figure fighters and tower defense and physics puzzles and those impossible, rage-inducing platformers. None of it cost a penny. All of it ran on Flash. For a while there, Flash basically was the internet's playground. And then, in 2007, Apple released the iPhone, and the iPhone did not run Flash. Everyone assumed that was temporary, a thing they'd patch later. They did not patch it. They dug in. And in April 2010, Steve Jobs wrote the most consequential blog post in the history of web software. It was called Thoughts on Flash, and it was Steve Jobs explaining, in cold detail, why Flash would never run on an iPhone. He said it crashed Macs constantly, it murdered your battery, it was a security nightmare, and it was built for a mouse in a world moving to touch. Oh, and it was owned by one company, Adobe, which Apple did not love either. The whole letter reads like a man who has decided your favorite thing is over. Now, the honest part, Jobs had his own reasons to want Flash gone. Apple wanted you building apps for the App Store where it took a cut, not free games on the open web where it took nothing. So call it visionary or call it convenient, but the complaints were also just true. Flash really was a security disaster that needed an emergency patch every other week, and on a phone, it really did drain your battery like a vampire. And the timing was lethal. The whole planet was buying smartphones, and the planet's biggest phone refused to run Flash. Suddenly, the format that powered the creative web couldn't run on the device everyone now had in their pocket. Worse, a new replacement was arriving, built right into the browser, called HTML5. It did most of what Flash did, with no plugin and no crashing. Nobody ever felt nostalgic about HTML5, but it won, and it won fast. From there, it was a slow execution. In July 2017, Adobe announced the date out loud. It would kill Flash at the end of 2020. 3.5 years' notice, agreed with Apple, Google, Microsoft, and Mozilla. And then, right on schedule, on the 31st of December 2020, Adobe officially ended Flash. A few days into January 2021, it flipped a switch that stopped Flash content from running at all. The plug wasn't just pulled, the socket was bricked. Which brings us to the catastrophe nobody outside the internet really clocked. All those games, all those cartoons, tens of thousands of them, didn't live on a hard drive somewhere safe. They lived on web pages that ran Flash. Turn Flash off, and they don't just stop selling, they stop existing. An entire era of the internet was about to blink out at midnight like it had never happened. Except a few people refused to let that happen. A preservation project called Flashpoint, started by one volunteer and built out by an army of others, frantically downloaded and archived the games before the lights went out, saving tens of thousands of them to play offline. And the Internet Archive built Flash playback right into your browser, using an open-source emulator called Ruffle, so you can load those old games today with no plugin at all. The plug got pulled, and a handful of strangers reached into the wall and caught everything that fell out. So that's Flash. Born as a tool nobody needed, crowned king of the creative web, executed by a phone, a blog post, and a better standard. And then, at the very end, quietly rescued by volunteers who decided this stuff was worth keeping. Software gets switched off all the time, and usually nobody notices. But every so often, a format takes a whole era of culture down with it. Flash nearly did. It just turned out the games refused to game over. If you want more stories behind the games you grew up on, you know what to press. Hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.